And this is my forecast for January, and it's already pretty clear to me that from an astrological perspective, the most difficult time of January 2024 was at the very start of the month, when Mars retrograde passed into 0 degrees 1 and 0 degrees of Leo and passed opposite Pluto. This was the second pass of 3. Mars initially passed opposite Pluto at the start of November 2024. It then passed opposite Pluto going retrograde at the start of January this month, 2025, and it will stand still and stop going retrograde at the end of February before eventually passing opposite Pluto one more time towards the end of April of this year. But this was the most volatile time of January, but that doesn't mean that the rest of January is easy, because it's not. But to a certain extent, January is a false dawn, in that the events of this January are going to be lots of posturing, lots of words, lots of fine talk, not a lot of substance. And to a certain extent, the same could be said of February as well. But as I've already specified in a number of my videos, both collectively for the world and individually for the individual sun signs, 2025 is a game changer, as is the first half of 2026. But we're not going to start seeing results or manifestations of this properly until we're into March of this year. However, some of the developments in March of this year are going to be seeded by what's happening quietly in the background during January. So let's look at January. Firstly, I want to draw your attention not so much to what the horoscope says, but I want to draw your attention to the night sky, because it's spectacular out there at the moment. You can clearly see Venus 3 times brighter than any star, setting on the horizon to the west for an hour to 2.5 hours after sunset. It's getting higher and higher. You can also see Saturn, although it's a lot fainter, but you will be able to see Saturn very clearly on the 18th, 19th and 20th of this month, because Venus and Saturn are going to be occupying not exactly the same space, but a finger width apart. So if you want to see Saturn, and if you've got a good pair of binoculars, you should be able to see the edge of its rings. Then the time to look for it is the 18th, 19th, 20th of this month. You can see Jupiter almost directly overhead if you're in the same latitude as Britain, due south, slightly overhead, around 10 p.m, wherever you are in the world. If you're in the southern hemisphere, look north. And it's bright. It's twice as bright as the nearest star. It's just south of the constellation of Orion. Just north. Yeah, just north of the constellation of Orion. And also rising in the east around 8-9 p.m, wherever you are in the world, you can see Mars, and it gets higher and higher overhead at midnight. And Mars is so bright, it is orange. So you can see Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn all of this month. And the way you'll know they're planets is because stars twinkle, planets don't. Useful reference, that one. The patterning of the planets this month. Well, now that the Mars-Pluto opposition is over, as we get into the second week of January, yes, there's a degree of minor activity. Mercury moves into Capricorn on the 8th of January. Mars is trine Neptune as we get into the middle of January, and the Sun will be opposite Mars on the 16th of January. Now, this is the time when Mars is going to be at its closest to the Earth. So if you really want to get a good close-up of Mars, get your little pair of binoculars or your little telescope and go out and look at it on the 15th, 16th, 17th. It's going to be bright, clouds permitting, of course. And then we get into the business period of the month. As we get towards the end of the third week of January, there's a lot of stuff happening all on the same day, on the 19th of January. Venus and Saturn occupy the same degree of longitude. Not of latitude, otherwise they'd be eclipsed, but of longitude, but they're very close to each other. At exactly the same day, Mercury in the sky is going to be sextiling both Venus and Saturn. And also on that day, the Sun is going to move from Capricorn into Aquarius. So it seems to me that for almost everyone in the world, the 19th of January is a very good time for negotiations, contracts, signatures, financial dealings, business plans, and it's a great time to start something in a way that's financially and business-wise in your favour. It's a good day. Use it. Stuff like this only happens on average once or twice a year. Then we get into the final 10 days of the month, and it all starts warming up. Now, before that, of course, we've got the full moon. The full moon is on the 13th of January, and it's at 24 degrees 0 of Cancer. So the Sun will be at 24 Capricorn, the Moon will be at 24 Cancer, and Uranus will be at 23.5 degrees of Taurus. So the Sun will be trining Uranus and the full moon will be sextiling Uranus. This is a really positive full moon. And how often do you hear me say this? So with the full moon on the 13th and a number of nice conjunctions and sextiles on the 19th, it really does seem as if the middle 10 days of this month are times of not luck, because luck is random, but fortune. You can make your fortune, you can earn your fortune, you can attract fortune. So fortune favours the brave over the middle 10 days of this month. As we get towards the end of the month, things get a little bit stranger. Mercury will move into Aquarius on the 28th of January, and then it will immediately conjunct Pluto on the 29th. Also on the 29th, we have the once every year annual new moon in Aquarius at 9 degrees of Aquarius. So the full moon, the new moon on the 29th, Sun conjunct Moon on the same day as Mercury is conjunct Pluto. This talks to me of some quite sudden news coming through that talks of subterfuge, things going on behind the scenes, suddenly coming up into the outside world, an element of malfeasance, things suddenly being revealed, bit of criminality coming to the surface that's previously not been expected. And it does seem that as we get into the end of the month, things are going to get a little bit crazy. And this is immediately followed on the 30th of January by Uranus standing still, stopping going retrograde and starting to move forward again. So the last 3 or 4 days of this month is going to see a sudden ramping up of pressure. But I remind you all that January, to a certain extent, it's not quite a full storm, as I may have described it in the past, but it is a time of seeds being planted. And perhaps the most obvious example of this is something I've yet to mention. The North Node, the point which most astrologers mumble something about karma and reincarnation about, which to me is just so much rubbish. To me, the North Node is about mission statement, purpose, and reason why you volunteered to come to planet Earth in the first place. The North Node, which has a 18 3/4 year cycle, near 19-year cycle, is going to move backwards, because it's always going retrograde, from Aries into Pisces. It's going to pass over the very start of the zodiac on, I think it's the 11th. Yes, the 11th of January, 12th, depending which time zone you're in. And this is the seed for the stuff that's coming up in late March, early April, when we will have 5, sometimes 6, and on one day 7 planets all within 15 degrees of each other, including an eclipse of the sun. We will come to this later on. We don't need to look at this in depth now, but there's going to be a lot of things happening at the very end of March and the first 10 days of April, and a lot of this is then going to be reflected backwards into mid-late January and go, the seeds for this were planted here. Now, I choose not to speculate into which areas this is going to take place in, but it is clear to me that the large nation states, particularly those of America and the USSR, what used to be the USSR, are ripe for sudden changes. And I do expect developments in both these countries that's going to surprise quite a lot of people. And it might not be quite as bad as other people think it might be. But this is more towards the end of this month. Over the next few days, I'm going to be doing a 3-day event. I'm going to be doing a live stream, 3 live streams, one evening after the other. Friday the 10th, Saturday the 11th, Sunday the 12th of January, 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. New York, 1 p.m. LA, and 5 a.m. Singapore, Perth, 7 a.m. Australia, 10 a.m. New Zealand. And I'm going to be looking at, in the first one, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and the movements of Saturn and Neptune in 25. In the second one, I'm going to be looking at Uranus and Pluto. And in the third one, I'm going to be looking at the collective movement of the outer planets during 2025. The first one will be available to the highest stream of my membership. The second one will be available to all of my members. And the third one will be public, live to the world. That way I'm catering for everyone, because I still want to keep astrology free to the world as much as I can, whilst at the same time giving some exclusive content to the people who have continued to support me after giving away astrology for 14 years free of charge. Not because I'm sanctimonious, but because I genuinely believe that astrology should be put out into the world for free. I will continue to do as much free content as I can, whilst at the same time catering for those who support me financially as I'm making this documentary on the history of Western astrology, of which hopefully the very first episode, or the taster episode, will be out by the end of January, and we're talking about making it free to view for everyone, just as a taster of what's to come. But in the meantime, January 2025, it's not going to be quiet. There's a sense of unease, a sense of things distilling. It's bubbling under, but it's not going to be too bad a month. Store your energy, charge your batteries, build your reserves up. Things are going to get a bit crazy as we get into March. Take care, world. Bye now.